My name is Ezra Monroe. I am 88 years old, and I have lived long enough to hear this silence before. I know this quiet. I know what it means. I've felt it settle over a country the way fog settles over a river before a flood. Heavy, patient, waiting. You don't notice it at first. That's the cruelest part. You go about your day. You drink your coffee. You watch people argue on their little screens. And you don't realize that the silence underneath all that noise is the same silence I heard in April of 1968. That silence has a sound. It sounds like a nation holding its breath. I am not a prophet. I am not a preacher, though Lord knows I've sat in enough churches to have soaked up some of it. I am just a man who has lived through something most of you have only read about in a book, if you ever even read the book. I am a man who watched a country tear itself apart once, and I am sitting here today because I think I need to tell you what I saw before that happened, what the air felt like, what people were saying in the days before everything changed, because you are living in that air right now, and most of you don't even feel it. Stay with me. What I'm about to tell you, I have never said to anyone, not to my children, not to my grandchildren. I've carried it for 57 years, but I'm 88, and my time is running out. So yours is the generation that gets to hear it. If you've never heard an old black man talk about what 1968 really felt like from the inside, not from a documentary, not from a textbook, then you need to subscribe to this channel right now, because this is not history. This is a warning. And this might be the most important thing you hear this year. I was 31 years old in the spring of 1968, living in Memphis, Tennessee. I had a wife named Clara, a boy, Marcus, who had just turned 6. I worked the night shift at a processing plant on South 3rd Street. They didn't put us in the offices. They never put us in the offices. Memphis in 1968 was a city that thought it had everything under control. The white people in charge, the mayor, the newspapers, the plant supervisors, they kept saying it was all fine. Progress was being made, they said. Things were moving forward, they said. The troublemakers were just stirring things up. But I had a friend. His name was Delroy Watkins. Delroy worked in the sewer department of the city of Memphis. Yet he was strong and quiet, and the kind of man who never asked for anything he didn't earn twice over. On February 1st of that year, 2 of his co-workers, Ecole Cole and Robert Walker, were crushed to death inside a garbage compactor. A garbage compactor. While white workers got sent home with pay on rainy days, black workers had to take shelter inside the trucks. They died like they didn't matter, because to the city of Memphis, they didn't. Delroy came to me 2 nights later. He sat at my kitchen table and he said, "Ezra, we are going on strike." And I said, "Delroy, be careful." He said, "I am past the point of careful." That was February. By March, Dr. King was in Memphis. I want you to understand what it felt like to be in that city when Martin Luther King Jr. walked into it. Not the version you've seen in the documentaries, the real version. The version where regular black men and women like me and Delroy stood on the sidewalk and watched him walk past and felt something break open in our chests that we had been keeping locked up for 30 years. I didn't touch him. I didn't speak to him. I just saw him and I thought, he looks tired. Lord, he looks tired. He was only 39 years old. He looked like a man carrying a weight that was too heavy for one body, and the city felt like a coiled spring. Now, I want you to stop and think about what the weeks before April 4th actually felt like. Not the anniversary, not the museum exhibit. I want you to feel the weather of those days. People were angry. And I don't mean the kind of angry you see on social media today. I mean the kind of angry that builds slowly in a body that has been told it doesn't count. For years, for decades, on for generations, the kind of angry that doesn't scream, it goes quiet. That's what you don't understand. Rage has two modes. There's the loud kind. Everybody sees the loud kind. Everybody talks about the loud kind on the news. But there's a quiet kind, too. And the quiet kind is the kind that precedes something irreversible. I remember the week before it happened. I was on the corner of Beale Street with Delroy and two men from the Union, Calvin and Freddie James. And none of us said much. We just stood there, watching. There was something in the air that I can only describe as a held breath, like the city itself was waiting, like the tension had reached a point where even the buildings knew something was about to give. You think I'm being poetic. I am not being poetic. On April 3rd, Dr. King gave his last speech. I was not in that church. I was home with Clara and Marcus, but my neighbor, a woman named Ida Pearl Hayes, she was there. She came back around midnight, and she knocked on my door. I opened it, and she just looked at me. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "Ezra, that man knows something we don't." The next evening, April 4th, 1968, at 6:01 in the evening, Martin Luther King Jr. was shot on the balcony of the Lorraine Motel. I heard the news on the radio. Clara put her hand over her mouth. Marcus was playing on the floor. He didn't understand. And I sat in that chair. I can still feel the fabric of it against my arms. And I felt something I had never felt before and have never felt since. I felt the silence shatter. If what I'm sharing with you is landing somewhere deep, I need you to subscribe to this channel before you continue. Because what comes next is the part I've never talked about, and I need to know that somebody out there is listening. Subscribe. Stay close. These stories are all I have left to give. I want to talk about what happened after, because everybody talks about what happened before. Everybody talks about the march, the speech, the dream, but nobody talks about what it felt like to live through the aftermath, what it did to the people who had staked everything on the belief that the movement was going to change things. After April 4th, something happened to the black men I knew. Something broke. I don't know how else to say it. Delroy, who was the most determined man I have ever known. Delroy stopped talking about the strike. He went back to work 3 weeks later, head down, eyes somewhere else, like a light had gone out behind them. Calvin moved to Chicago that summer. Freddie James started drinking. He was dead by 1973, 41 years old, and I became something I am ashamed of. I became careful. Not Delroy's careful, the kind that means strategic, the other kind, the kind that means small. I stopped raising my hand at the plant. I stopped speaking up when the supervisor passed me over for a promotion and gave it to a white man who had been there half as long. I told myself I was protecting my family, and maybe I was, but I was also burying something alive. I worked at that plant for 22 more years. I never got into that office. I watched 3 white men get promoted over me, men I had trained, men who came to me for answers in their first months on the job. And every time, and I went home, and I sat in that chair, and I told myself that was just how things were. And here is the truth that I need to say out loud, at 88 years old, because it costs me something to say it. I was wrong to accept it. Not because I should have thrown away my livelihood. I had Clara. I had Marcus. Later, I had 2 daughters, Renee and Sylvia. I had responsibilities that were real, but I accepted it in my spirit. I let it calcify into something that lived in me, and that calcification, that slow hardening of a man's sense of what he deserves, that passed down. It passes down. You carry it into how you raise your son. Your son carries it into how he sees himself. And your son's son inherits it without even knowing where it came from. That is what they don't tell you about systemic damage. It doesn't just hurt you. It plants something in you that you pass on without meaning to. Now let me tell you why I am sitting here today talking about 1968. I am talking about 1968 because I have heard this silence before. I don't say this to frighten you. I say it because I am 88 years old, and I have earned the right to call a thing what it is. The silence before a storm is not nothing. It is full. It is heavy. It carries the weight of everything that has been building underground. I see the same mechanics today that I saw in 1967 and early 1968. People who are exhausted, not the loud kind of exhausted, the quiet kind, the kind that comes when you have been told, generation after generation, that your time is coming, that things are getting better, and that the arc of the moral universe bends toward justice, and you are still waiting for it to bend your way. I see young people who have stopped believing in the institutions that failed their parents. I see anger that has gone quiet. And, as an 88-year-old man who has lived through what quiet anger becomes, I am telling you, that is not peace, that is pressure. But here is what I also know, and this is the part the documentaries always leave out. In 1968, after everything, after the shooting, after the riots, after the grief that settled over Black America like a second skin, we did not stop. We did not stop. Delroy went back to work, yes. His light dimmed, yes. But the strike? The sanitation strike? It was settled on April 16, 1968, 12 days after Dr. King was killed. The workers won. Not everything. But they won something, and that something mattered. The movement did not die on that balcony. It scattered, it went underground, it changed form, and it kept moving. I am not telling you that because I want to give you easy comfort. I am telling you because you need to understand what resilience actually looks like. It does not look like a parade. It looks like Delroy Watkins, eyes dimmed, going back to work, and still standing up at the union meeting that following Monday. So now I want to speak to you directly, and I want you to listen to me the way you would listen to someone who has seen what you are walking toward. You think you are tired. You think things are impossible. You think the divisions are too deep and the hatred is too old and the systems are too entrenched. I know. I know that feeling. I have felt it since before you were born. But you have something I did not have in 1968. You have information. You have access. You have the ability to talk to each other across distances that would have taken us weeks by mail. And you are wasting it. You are using it to perform anger at each other instead of organizing against the things that are actually hurting you. Don't do what I did. Don't let it calcify. Don't let the disappointment harden into acceptance. Because once you accept the low ceiling they put over you, once you internalize it as the ceiling of what is possible, you will pass that ceiling down to your children, and they will live under it without even knowing it was built by someone else. I spent too many years making myself small in rooms where I should have taken up space. I spent too many years telling myself that survival was enough. It is not enough. Survival is the floor, not the ceiling. You are the generation that gets to decide whether the silence before this storm becomes something that breaks everything, or becomes the quiet before a different kind of movement, one that doesn't depend on any one man standing on any one balcony. It depends on you, all of you, acting small every day in every room you're in, or refusing to. I buried too many friends who never got to make that choice. You still have time to make yours. My name is Ezra Monroe. I am 88 years old, and I have lived long enough to know that history does not repeat. But it rhymes. Lord, it rhymes so well that sometimes I think the whole world is stuck in the same verse. I'm waiting for someone to sing the chorus different. I've said what I needed to say. I've paid a debt to Delroy, to Calvin, to Freddie James, to Ida Pearl Hayes, to Clara, who passed in 2019 and never stopped believing things would get better. I've paid a debt to the two men who died in a garbage truck on February 1st, 1968, whose names were Eccle Cole and Robert Walker, and who deserved so much more than they were given. What you do with what I've told you, that is your business, but do something with it. Don't just feel it for a few minutes and scroll on. Let it sit. Let it ask you something uncomfortable. Let it change one thing about how you show up tomorrow. That is all any of us can ask of each other. If this reached you, if this old man's voice found you somewhere you needed to be found, then stay. Subscribe to this channel, because I am not done. I have more to give before my time runs out, and every story I have left is a story that somebody who came before me paid a real price to live. The least you can do is listen. I'll be here for as long as I have left.